Recording. It's like froze, I thought. I guess it didn't. Hi.
Hi there.
Hi, our fake studio audience. I mean, we don't. I'm
Well,
going to start over.
If you're watching this, it's not fake now because you're on.
That's true. Okay, so what we are doing here, my name is Malayna. This is Reverend Mike McMorrow at the Centers for Spiritual Living in Granada Hills, California. And this is Reverend Mike's idea. So if it goes horribly wrong,
it's all my fault.
You had talked to me about wanting to sort of break down Sunday talks after you gave them and sort of take the time to go down the rabbit holes and develop ideas that there's not time to do on a Sunday, right?
Well, and just to have another conversation about it, and then also to make any corrections that may be needed as well.
Well, and I liked the idea because I think for some people it might be more interesting to see a conversation about the topics rather than go into a traditional church setting,
right?
Or spiritual center setting. So this could be
fun,
appealing to some,
yes,
or just us.
Well, thank you for being willing to do it.
Well, sure, it sounds fun, and I have the notes. I don't know if you could see. These are what the Sunday talk looks like.
Sacred text from Sunday
beforehand, and so I thought December 1st was a good time to start because I'm used to growing up in Unity, which is another new thought spiritual path. December is all about Christmas, and so as somebody who has been part of planning Sunday services, I would have started December 1st with let's sing Christmas carols, let's talk about,
let's get our Advent on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I found it refreshing that Science of Mind. Now, to explain how this works. They have topics throughout the year for every Sunday.
Yeah, so religious science, or actually Centers for Spiritual Living, is the home organization that of which we belong. We are a religious science denomination, and so we have themes for annual theme.
Mm-hmm.
This month for December happens to be wholeness. But we also like to honor all faith traditions, for we teach and believe, and I hold dear to my heart the idea that it's many paths up to one mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we are attempting to do here in December. Of course, you can't jam everybody into the month, even our flames of faith, but anyway, we can set the tone and create a consciousness as a vessel to explore these things.
Well, what I liked about the December 1st talk, which the title is Science of Mind and Rohatsu, which is a Japanese term, and it means the 8th day of the 12th month.
Yes.
But it is a celebration of Buddha's enlightenment, right?
Correct. Siddharta Gautama's Day of Enlightenment.
So enlightenment, so with the focus on light, which ties into the holiday season,
right?
And is very universal. So it doesn't matter what spiritual path you follow.
Right.
Every one has some kind of festival of light.
Yeah. I kind of beat that idea to death.
No, I don't think it was beaten to death. I think, I am somebody who likes sort of the linear organization of thoughts.
Yes.
So I like things that, like maybe 2 or 3 themes, things that come back to a theme.
All right, good. I did come back to a theme, didn't
yes,
I? Okay,
yes.
Good.
So then I took the Sunday talk off the podium, the notes.
Yes.
And
which I gave you permission to do.
That's right. I didn't just steal them, although I have with other
could.
people.
Yeah.
Or I found them in at my previous spiritual center. I would find them in the recycling that was gathered after the service, and I'd go, "Oh, that's that guest speaker's notes. I'm going to take a look at those, just to kind of study them." So
see if they left any credit card receipts.
No,
Cancel. I didn't say that.
You never know what gems you
I've
can
been
find.
watching
How about that?
too many crime shows. All right.
Yeah, I do that too. So let's see. As I went through your notes, I made notes of my own. So I put a star next to if you were living in 1919 or 919, or even a human living 10,000 years ago, you would have been very aware of the dark and the things that lurk out there.
Yeah.
I think I put a star and a laughing face next to that because you acted out the things that lurk out there.
Yes.
Can you just recreate
well,
that?
I just remember, because I was one of those kids who was afraid of the dark.
Oh.
And so I remember, and I think it's tied to this one incident, because
Okay.
I also used to be a rocker when I would sleep,
Oh, okay.
and I grew up to be a rocker.
Yeah.
But so I was probably making racket, and my dad. So it was dark. It's like Ohio dark, and all of a sudden I see this visage poking his head into the doorway, right? And my dad, being Irish, of course, had a very pale thing, right? It was like the boogeyman is coming in.
But he wasn't trying to do that to you, was he? He was just checking on you.
No, it's just me and my own little
imagination.
6-year-old. Holy crap, what's that?
So I remember you doing something like this, where you're like, the things that
lurking. But isn't it like that?
It is, but that makes me laugh. I love that. So I encourage people to find Sunday's Talk on our CSL YouTube channel and catch, that moment, because it's worth it. But that's also why, I appreciate your talks, because you're coming from a place of just being a normal person who's just sharing. So
good.
That's something that I would do when I'm talking to any of my friends, is act stuff out. So I appreciate it when you do.
But it doesn't mean I can't be deep once in a while, does it?
No, and I'm looking at some of this, and I thought of this.
I hate to be shallalalo.
You're not. No, but I appreciate that you could pretend to be shallow while you're being really deep.
Good.
So I underlined on the next page a couple of places where, when you said it, it sounded so poetic.
Uh-huh.
And then I was thinking, sometimes we write differently than we speak. Often we do, because we're taught to write in sort of a formal way. So, for was it not the gods themselves that hid the sun away? Doesn't that sound like so Shakespearean?
It does. I wonder if I wrote that myself.
That's the thing sometimes when you're gathering from different sources, like I'll copy and paste and go, okay, I'll edit that in later, and then sometimes I don't really edit it. I just let
it does sound like a storyteller technique, I would say. Yeah.
Okay.
For was it not the gods themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That hid the sun away, called the moon to rise, called forth fearsome tempests. Maybe I should let you do this. This is your talk.
No, I'm enjoying it. Go for it.
You could go back and watch him do it.
I've already done this 3 or 4 times. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm going to leave that one there. But then later you brought up light can penetrate the darkness, and that was sort of a theme that you ran with, which I hadn't thought of it as light penetrating the darkness. That's that's an active verb. It's not like you can see light in the darkness. It's an action. So,
and yet when you think about it, right? So if the lights go out, you lose power or whatever, or you're camping, and not so much camping, but let's say you're in your home and the electricity goes out and you fumbling around for a candle, right? And so it really is like more of a penetration into the dark, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm sort of picturing the headlights.
Dark. Yeah, exactly.
Because it reaches ahead, it reaches out.
Yeah, well, that's actually maybe even better, because when there's just a wee bit of mist, you can actually see the light beam.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Thanks.
Good job.
Well, and that's the beauty of the metaphor of light, that it's a spiritual metaphor, and everybody has experience of lighting up the darkness, of feeling that glow from candlelight or firelight, of and understanding it as, sometimes in life we're in the dark, we don't know where to go, and even a small bit of light can lead the way.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Here's another one. For after humans had enough to eat, this is from his Sunday talk, they had long nights to consider the nature of the gods. Can we not see how it may be true? as anthropologists tell us, that the imagery of light is a metaphor that appears through many cultures. That's just what I said. That's where I got it from.
Nice.
But can we not see? That's the poetic phrasing that I caught there.
Yeah.
And it's true. Light is, Joseph Campbell, and I don't know, did you mention Joseph Campbell in this talk? I know you've mentioned him.
I've mentioned him,
recently.
and actually he was one of the books that is focused on within the organization this month. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, who doesn't love Joseph? I mean, once you've heard Joseph Campbell, you can't help but love the guy.
Yeah.
There's a handful of them,
Right.
Alan Watts, Joseph Campbell. I personally like Father Richard Rohr.
Okay.
He's got a book out, The Universal Christ, that I'll be dipping into these next few Sundays.
Cool.
Which is amazing.
Sounds good. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah, I like the guys who pull stuff in, from different places
and make it a universal connection. Yeah. Right. So Joseph Campbell always talks about, because I really love Joseph Campbell and how, because I grew up in a multicultural family, so to find somebody else who studied it and says, hey, this is really what it looks like to people who look at it, made me feel like, oh, okay, it's not just me that's making these connections.
Well, and Campbell did those that great video series on PBS with Bill Moyers. And the thing that was really great about that was Moyers was kind of like us, Western people who weren't familiar with things. And you could see his mind, like in real time, kind of connecting the things and even taking us through, well, gee, Joe, if that's true, then what about this, right? And he's like, yeah, exactly right, that kind of thing.
And there again, that series of interviews was a conversation. So when Joseph Campbell wrote these thick volumes of The Hero with a Thousand Faces, exactly. And they're very academic because that's what he was, a college professor.
In a small college.
Yeah, Sarah Lawrence College, I think. And I've read the printed version of The Power of Myth, the interview with Bill Moyer, who I almost call Boyer because I made it one word. But it's easier to read, and that's right, it's all one, to digest as a conversation in colloquial terms.
And I don't know if Campbell created the hero's journey, the imagery with the circle.
I believe, I don't know if he did the imagery, but...
or if it was others who studied his work and did it, but what a wonderful, because I do know that storytellers, screenwriters in particular, use that as a way to develop a story. Which
in fact,
I probably should have used in writing my own book, but I didn't.
You can still go back and tweak.
I'll have the second edition before the first is out. Okay.
And when are we going to see this book? Is it out yet?
Well, it is getting close.
Okay, cool.
Yes, it's getting close. I was hoping to have it out by our conference in Denver, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay.
But if
and when is the conference?
In February, mid-February.
All right.
So, but it will be early 2020 because it's really close. The editor has it now.
Wow.
And is incorporating, because I did a talk in a Silomar.
Oh, okay, yes.
So did I send that to you?
You did,
yes,
and tell our viewers who are in the thousands, I'm sure.
So I did a talk at our summer conference at a Silomar, and
it was called?
It was entitled Spirituality and the Recovering Redneck. And so it was just to reassure everyone in the New Thought movement that in spite of, let's face it, man, it's been a tough couple of years for aging white men.
If you say so.
We're getting a bunch of stuff. We're being called out on a lot of stuff, and I would say 90% of it is legit. And yet, there are many millions of men like myself who have been paying attention and awakened and are allies and ready to take on that role more.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a talk about that. And
With
so
a lot of comedy.
With a lot of comedy.
Yeah.
And hey, but because if God doesn't have a sense of humor, man, we're
clearly God does.
Yes, I mean, look.
God,
look
even if you think of God strictly as an energy.
Or sea urchins.
Sea urchins are pretty weird.
Yeah.
Fun, but weird.
But I'm sorry, you were...
See, this is all about digressing. So this is going to be one long digression, however long we do.
Go for it. You were getting ready to go deep, and I cut you off. So.
So just, we think of, when I hear God, I go to an outside being, like a giant head with a booming voice, okay, having a sense of humor. When you said that, that's where my mind went. And so I wanted to because this is the process I go through in my own spiritual path and seeking right now, is reframing that to be God as an energy that is within me as well as throughout the universe, and tie it back to that oneness. So I was trying to imagine an energy having a sense of humor, but I can do that. I have good imagination for that.
That's an interesting idea, except think about when you spontaneously laugh at something that has your funny bone, mm-hmm, right? Particularly something that, like wet your pants funny. And that happens in real life, just something that happens. There's energy in that.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, of course, I suppose God is what you make it, but why wouldn't you want that to be in your understanding of what the divine is?
Right. I think it's kind of essential.
Well, I do too, because at least for myself, mm-hmm, within my own understanding of spirituality, there are many challenges to human life. Mm. Darkness, if you will, or at least periods of darkness.
Yeah, definitely.
That we can bring light to, just, mm-hmm, to bring it back to the metaphor. Mm-hmm.
Well,
and humor is one of those
lightening
ways.
Up.
Yeah.
To lighten up. I remember seeing, there was a TV series, I think it was called Iconoclasts, where they took people who are experts in different fields and brought them together to have a conversation. And Mike Myers, the comedy actor, met with Deepak Chopra.
Oh, that must
and
be
they
good.
talked about the connection between ha-ha and aha.
Oh.
That they're both,
So
kind
who
of
was the one who coined that one? Just please tell me it was Myers.
I think it was, and he might have, he referred back to his teacher, whose name was Del something. I can't think of the last name.
Del Rio? Coach Del Rio?
No. Canadian comedy sort of teacher, I guess.
That's right, he is Canadian.
Mm-hmm. And that's another way of looking at light. When we lighten up, when we have a laugh at something, a sense of humor.
To aha?
Yeah.
I may have to steal that one.
Well, I'm sure they will catch you. Somebody will. But I think it's universal enough.
Said.
Yes. The prophet, Mike Myers. So next page in your Sunday talk notes.
I hope this talk went a lot faster on Sunday. If it didn't, I apologize.
Well, there were certainly fewer digressions. How long have we been talking? Is there anything that gives us
no idea, but I'm enjoying it.
Okay, good. So we'll keep going.
Yeah.
So Rohatsu, which we mentioned at the beginning, which is the topic, we're finally getting into it. So a Zen concept, Japanese word, which means the 8th day of the 12th month. And it was when Siddharta Gautama achieved enlightenment. And sitting in the seats listening, I thought, wait a minute, when I lived in Sri Lanka, we celebrated that and called it Vesak, and it was celebrated in May. And so I went,
right.
It's interesting. And so I went home and looked that up, and they're both considered Bodhi day. So the Bodhi tree, which is the tree under which the Buddha sat, much like this one here, maybe with less Celtic knots, but who knows? There's a lot of symbolism that is that echoes throughout different cultures too. And so there are cultural differences about when it happens, but it's still the same celebration. I think maybe Vesak in Asia or South Asia is more connected to his birth and enlightenment and death happening at the same time of year or something like that. It's like they do it, all of it together.
As you're saying that, so I wonder when the shortest day of the year is in the southern hemisphere.
Well, Sri Lanka is still in the northern hemisphere, but just barely.
So
it's a little bit north, yeah.
So it's probably, it doesn't really get a solstice then per se, right?
No, there are monsoon seasons and harvest seasons that are different. So their harvest, like we have our Thanksgiving in November, their harvest time is in April.
Well, I do know that there was I guess you would call it a revolt in India. I don't know the details, but I just remember hearing the story that from Goenka, a Buddhist teacher that I followed for a while, I was reading up on.
Okay.
And he spoke to how Buddhism became very unpopular in India and was actually driven to the north and out towards Burma, and to the south and east.
Okay.
So maybe it has something to do with that. You know, who knows? These things happened. You know, a couple thousand years ago.
Yeah,
right?
through the history of humans who get mad about things and have fight and push each other out. And,
well, you know, in AA they say, you know, if you want to start a new meeting in AA, all you need is a coffee pot, a big book, and a resentment. So maybe churches get formed that way.
I'm gonna say it's quite possible. So I did find a video. I don't know if we want to show it now, but I found a video of Sri Lankan children who live in, I think, Australia, talking about what Vesak is and how it's celebrated. So let's see if we can figure out how to share that.
And if nothing else, they are adorable.
They are.
So here we go. Let's see if
Sweet,
the Rev has the tech down today.
All right.
My name is Sandra. And my name is Teresa. I'm Janelle. I'm Cicely. I'm Yenali. I'm Metali. And we're going to teach you
I put on the subtitles, but I don't know if it'll spell right.
We are at the Buddhist temple, which is where most people come to pray, and we hold the Vesak festivities.
Those are tough kids.
Vesak is a festival that's celebrated by Buddhists all over the world. Buddhism is a religion that started in India and has spread around Asia. These days, Buddhists are right around the world. There are more than 500 million Buddhists around today. The main idea of Buddhism is to become free from suffering. The Buddha preached that how to do this is to control the mind. The easiest way to follow Buddhism is by the 5 precepts. There, I will not kill, I will not steal, I'll always be good, I will not lie, and I will not drink alcohol.
That's totally
The Vesak is about celebrating the birth, the enlightenment, and the passing away of the Buddha. Before the Lord Buddha was Buddha, he was a prince. When he was born, he was brought up with everything he ever wanted. But one day when he was around the age of 20, he ventured outside the kingdom. He saw 4 things: an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and a monk. And when he saw these, he realized that not everything in life is happy and there's lots of suffering.
All you need is
became the Buddha by becoming enlightened. For the first 6 years, he was on fasting, and then he finally realized that this is not the way. And then he started to meditate. So the way to achieve enlightenment is to get rid of craving. So in life, whenever you want something, you're going to want something, and then when you get it, you want it again. If you don't get it, you're always going to be somewhat sad. So the Buddha taught us to get rid of our cravings and to be happy with what we have. And he teaches us in turn to be enlightened by controlling the mind, speech, and thought. Before we start learning about the Buddhism, we meditate. When you meditate, your final goal is to try and keep your mind on one thing. As a child, it's really hard to keep your mind on one thing and focus.
That's a relief for a kid.
Vesak is a very happy and peaceful day for us. On Vesak Day, we normally give out cards to people who are either our relatives or our friends. It's sort of like a birthday card, and we're celebrating the Buddha and what he has done.
I was trying to read the similes on the card.
Obsessing means you worship the Lord Buddha and praying. My favorite part is seeing the Vesak lanterns. The lanterns mean that you're enlightened and that you get rid of darkness. I actually like that candles because they're really colorful and they're always shine. Just bringing these lights.
Oh,
Thanks for letting us speak about
billboards about the Buddha's life, and they're all lit up. Aren't they sweet?
Very sweet.
And
Thanks
they did
for
such a
sharing
good
that
job.
with us.
Sure.
Yeah. Those kids were awesome.
Weren't they? I just discovered them earlier
I could
today.
build a nice youth program around them.
Let's import them.
In fact, I think all the adults will just come in and listen to them.
Well, that's an idea.
Yeah.
So you had some slides that, because I noticed during the talk, you mentioned the Eightfold Path, and then you started to name the 8, and you got about 4 in, and then said, and some others I don't remember, which I don't blame you for.
Right.
So were those on one of the slides that you made? No?
Nope.
All right.
Otherwise, they would have been in my talk.
I looked them up.
That was one of those things where I was just kind of riffing.
And,
right.
I like it when you riff. I like the riffing.
Yeah, I do too. It's just I should know what I'm talking about. But
and
so the Four Noble Truths, which we mention every Sunday, of course, in the first service, I was like, and the four.
What are those things called?
The four things.
The 4 things.
The 4 things of Buddhism
are what? Do you remember them now?
Well, let's see. So
I've got the
life
Noble
is
Eightfold.
suffering.
Okay.
We suffer because of our attachments or aversions. That the way to break the cycle of suffering is through the Eightfold Path.
Okay.
And I'm missing one. Probably the one I need to work on.
Well, I only found one about the Eightfold Path, so I can help you with the 4th precept.
And it's tied to the Wheel of Dharma, right? So
this is from BuddhaWeekly.com for people who want to share it. Maybe I'll post it to the Zoom chat. But The Noble Eightfold Path is the title of it.
Yes.
And so we have right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right living, right effort, right attentiveness, and right concentration.
Yeah.
So that's the 8.
So what's the difference between attentiveness
and concentration? Well, you can pay attention without really totally focusing and concentrating, I suppose.
Well, I'm guessing right concentration is what we would call meditation here in the West.
So I just shared the link on our little Zoom chat. If you're watching this and you can access it after the fact, I don't know if you can, but
along with the YouTube vid, they're both up there. So check them out.
Yay! So I interrupted you talking about concentration as meditation. You have anything else you want to say about that?
Well, and attentiveness would be the idea of be here now, right? So as we're going about our business, being attentive to it, whether we're washing the dishes, sweeping the floor, or doing our algebra homework.
Do you do algebra homework
Maybe
still?
that would be right concentration.
Maybe. But there is a way to...
I threw that in there for a student.
Oh, that's smart. Because we're envisioning our wide audience, our wide-reaching audience.
Yeah.
But when you said about washing the dishes and being present, usually when we're doing, when I'm doing almost anything, I'm thinking of a million other things at the same time. So to just bring my attention to what I'm doing, take a breath, and be in the moment is usually very freeing. So I'm not necessarily concentrating.
It's good
that
mental.
Seems like more effort.
Right. Well, it's good mental practice too.
So I found this note about, it says it took centuries for these practices to reach the West, which is the Eightfold Path and the Buddhist teachings. They were hiding in plain sight. That early Christian fathers were fine ones for meditating. That sounds like an Irish. They were fine ones for meditating.
That's right, yeah.
And we'll explore that later in the month. So is that coming up in your...
That's coming up because the early Christian, there was a tradition that preceded, I would say. Of course, this is, again, a cursory understanding. I haven't studied these things in depth. But to me, from my way of saying things, it seemed to be a precursor of the monastic tradition. But you had many...
were they like mystics?
Yeah, well, I think you get pretty mystical when you spend a lot of time in silence.
Yeah.
And you don't go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Ascetics? Is that another?
Yes. So there was an ascetic tradition in the East, and so these guys would live in the desert, right? Because that's where you could say John the Baptist was an ascetic, right? If you're out in the wilderness, which is the desert, and you're eating wild locusts and honey, that's probably an ascetic life, I would say.
Yeah, it's an extreme simplification, removal from the day-to-day normal world, society, responsibilities, to focus only on the inner life.
Right. And of course, from the Christian tradition then, he was also the first to recognize and proclaim, Jesus. So, anyway.
I'm looking at the notes and finding another poetic line. The way out of the dilemma is to explore and realize the availability of the infinitude. I'm not sure even where to put the emphasis on that. Infinitude of the divine.
Infinitude, yes.
That is available to us at all times.
Yes.
Infinitude. I like that word.
That's a Beckwithian.
He does.
He likes to make up words.
The turn of phrase.
He's very clever.
And
but you know
inspiring.
What he means, right?
Yeah.
So there's an attitude and there's infinity, and you combine the two and mash them up. You got an infinitude or an infinitude.
Well, some
an
attitudes.
Infinitude of gratitude.
Yeah. And some attitudes would be good to be infinite. Some attitudes, not so much.
Well, that's true.
If you got a tude.
But the idea is that, we are swimming in it, right? We are living it. We are breathing it. It's breathing us. That there's this wonderful circulation going on. And but we have to remember it. And we have to remember it when it counts.
Yes. In the
so it's good to remember on Sunday,
darkness.
But it's even better if you can remember it as you're getting on the freeway on Monday.
Yeah, or like I have had recent experience the last week or so of just like, I guess fear and concern. And the thing that calms me down lately is to take a breath and listen to the thing that is beating my heart, which I got that phrase from Kyle Cease, who's a comedian turned transformational speaker. And so he used language that is secular, but points to the spiritual.
Right.
So to listen to the thing that's beating your heart and call that whatever you want. And so when I can get away from all the names, I know Charles Fillmore talked about the back of your heart. So that takes it even more, like you can imagine your heart being at the front of your chest, but if you look at if you imagine the back of your heart, it's right in the center of your body, the center of your being.
That's very clever.
Close to the solar plexus and the, right in the middle. So,
thanks, Chuck.
Thanks, Chuck. But that's the attention and concentration, right? To bring your thoughts back to the present and the truth. At that, as spiritual practitioners, we want to remember, as spiritual beings having a human experience, we want to remember the spiritual truth. And that can be very challenging when it's time to pay a bill that the money hasn't shown up yet, or something like that, something real world and
we find ourselves beginning to flood emotionally over something. Other than gratitude.
Yes.
That's always a good one. But
there are times when gratitude.
That's the rub, man.
Yeah, when gratitude, I can turn it against myself into guilt. Like, I know I should be thankful for this and this and this.
Yeah, that's
and I am. Helpful. And yet, I'm still pretty, concerned.
Well, there's the intellectual recognition, and then there's the emotional, where's my stuff part.
Right. Yeah.
Which,
exactly.
That's the big bugaboo for most new thought practitioners, because what we teach is using spiritual practice along with right thinking, as the Buddhists would say, to create more good in our life.
Abundance.
Good and abundance, and which means, of course, positive cash flow and a sustainable life that's at least sustainable, if not living in overflow. And I feel like that kind of takes a while to do, unless now that there are many people who come to the teaching who have that part down, right? They have a strong career, maybe they have a skill set that has led to, maybe they're good at mathematics or some other high need in the engineering field or what have you. But and so they have that end down, but maybe their health isn't what it could be, or they have trouble with relationships, and sometimes we all get stymied creatively. Yeah. So that yearning for something more, a deeper connection. I'm trying to remember. I've heard it said many times that people come back to church or to a spiritual center usually because of the 3 Ds. I can only remember 2 right now. Death. Desperation. Oh, okay. Death or divorce is what I was going to say. Desperation could be death, divorce, or desperation, and it could be that the third one that you're reaching for. Maybe those are all 3 different ways to say desperation. So Maureen Hoyt, the past minister here, my teacher, she used to say that people get here either through inspiration or desperation. And I have met very few people who come here from inspiration. There's usually some element, well, if not desperation, certainly discontent. Right? That there's an itch. That people have tried every available remedy, hoping that it's not church. And they have to step out of that comfort and then box. They show up either here or to other places. And I think most people, when they come here, they certainly leave feeling uplifted and hopefully provoked one way or another, because that's what I'm really trying to do is to provoke people into thinking deeper.
I'm trying to remember one of my teachers and friends, Reverend Kelly Isola, says we're here to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. I think it's disturbed.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask her. That's basically
I think I heard it, to afflict the comfortable.
Afflict, that's probably it, yeah.
Right. That's like it's not that bad here, okay? If I've just talked you out of, oh, this guy said, oh, maybe not.
He's one of those afflictors.
Right. Or
provokers.
To comfort the afflicted or to afflict the comfortable.
Right,
yeah.
right.
So
yeah, to give
but,
something to think about.
Any church, temple, or mosque should be doing that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, again, there's many paths up the mountain. I don't know of any other path that I could take outside of this one, because this is the one teaching that is attempting to bring the empirical side of life, which is science, together with the unseen, which is philosophy or religious thought.
Yeah.
And and making it okay.
Right.
And that all of it is an expression of divinity, including ourselves, which to me, that's like the final frontier. Wow, I could be, there's some part of me that is divine.
Yeah.
But, if that's true, why do I keep reaching for cookies?
Cookies are divine.
Cigarettes, or,
right.
drink, or porn, or, whatever our little bugaboo is.
Yeah. That
anger
distracts us from.
Right. Why am I on Facebook giving everybody hell?
You don't do that.
No, but I think about it. And in my heart, it's already done.
Well, and that's what I like about the New Thought movement and teachings also, is looking at the lessons that have been handed down to us through history from all the different cultural traditions, and looking at it in cultural context and also the universal. So what can we take from it that's universal, and know that some of the rules and the laws and the parameters that were created were for contextual reasons, historical context. And so they may not be relevant to us today. And so we take all that is available, the knowledge of science, the knowledge of history, the knowledge of cultures, and it's that unified principle that Einstein was looking for. I think that's what religious science is doing, is taking it all and making it one.
And, we have to remember that for the vast majority of people, they are comfortable in their old.
Yeah.
Or not, I don't want to say old, in their understanding or their denominational understanding of what truth is.
Yeah.
Which,
the Dalai Lama
can sometimes be challenging. Right?
Yeah.
So I went to an interfaith solidarity march, and I had an evangelical Christian with his Bible in hand who just thought it was absurd. The idea of interfaith was absurd because there's only one path.
But he was there, right? I mean, he was there marching?
We went by the front door of his church.
Oh.
And
so he was just standing there shaking his head at everybody like, I don't get it.
There looks like a guy I can harass for half a mile. Yeah. So
wow.
After a while, I just said, hey, man, I don't think you're interested in having a conversation. You're just here to bust my chops. So move on, please. So,
yeah, and I think there are people who are wired differently. I looked this up with the last election, major election, presidential election cycle, and trying to understand the division in the country of people who have such different ways of looking at how they vote. And I found a bunch of research that said that some people are wired in such a way that they are looking to prevent the bad things from happening. And so that's where they invest their energy. And other people look forward and outward and are willing to step into the unknown, to explore and to learn new things and to gather that knowledge. And so that can be applied to how people practice their faith. It could be the same faith. There could be two people going to the exact same spiritual center
absolutely,
who approach it completely differently, because maybe it's brain chemistry, maybe it's their upbringing created the synapses, and
well, even
you know,
not even that. I mean, even within the Christian church, right? So you have the admonition of Jesus, which is to care for the poor, right? And then you have this whole nother mindset that, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps kind of thing, which is not a Christian idea, by the way. But
it's American, isn't it?
but,
it's cultural. Cultural idea.
But it doesn't call you to do anything either, right? So
not for anybody else, certainly.
So Jesus really raised the bar very high. And so whether you see, I don't think you have to see him as a Messiah or the only path to embrace the principles that he was trying to get across, and that he believed in so deeply.
Yeah.
That he's willing to be, nailed to a cross to make his point. So, and of course, people have been arguing about what happened then. We'll be exploring that this month a little bit. That's more kind of an Easter thing, but I personally love the Jesus story. So the Buddha, of course, as young folks taught, was born into wealth as a prince, into power, right? And that was a path that he could have taken, but for his calling to explore the nature of suffering. And then you have this poor, excuse me, the idea that this great king of the Jews was born in a stable,
right,
to undocumented parents, right?
Yeah.
There's no room in the inn, and
well, the hero's journey talks about that there are many cultures where the great leader comes from humble beginnings. So it's interesting to look at how the Buddha came from the opposite. Yeah.
And then made a conscious choice, because he was 20. So he would have had his inheritance. He was married. He had a child, I believe, at the same time. So there's a lot of lessons to be taken.
Well, and
these various traditions.
We're all on our own spiritual path. We gather community around us to support us as we move to reach our soul's calling. And so all we can do is follow the teachings that resonate with us, connect with people, do the best we can, and
to remain curious.
Right?
And I think the one question to be most curious about is, if I knew absolutely that there was nothing and no one standing in my way, that I really am an avenue for the infinite creator to create the life of my wildest dreams by means of me and all the things around me, how would my life look different today?
That reminds me of a song by Janice Stanfield. And the song is, "What Would I Do Today If I Were Brave?" And so Google that, "If I Were Brave."
Write that one down.
Yeah, the song is "If I Were Brave" by Janice Stanfield, 1N. And she's one of the New Thought music artists that go to the Empower Positive Music Festival, also known as the Posi Fest, that I've gone to the last few years.
Yes. And where is that? Oh, this year it was in
This
SoCal.
year,
right?
no.
You went somewhere?
I went, last one was in Florida, which was in February, and the last several have been in Florida. This year, at the end of April, it'll be at Unity Village.
Clearwater?
We were in Tampa.
Okay.
But
And afterwards you went to Disney World.
nope, came right back.
I went to Disney World
When?
a few years back.
Oh, okay.
We had our conference there.
Oh, okay.
I put on my sneakers, got there just as the gate opened, and I hit every single land in Disney World.
Wow.
I
That's
was
impressive.
running through that place like a maniac. It's like a
I
marathon
like that.
runner grabbing hot dogs on the run. Out of my way, kid, I'm on my way to fantasy world.
That is impressive.
And yeah.
I mean, Disney can be seen as a whole nother
Well, you have
religion.
to, I don't know where the hell I was, but you had to take a steamboat to get to part of it,
Okay.
right? Which is kind of a drag.
I've only been to the Florida one.
No matter how
once,
fast
a
you
long
walk
time
on
ago.
that steamboat.
You have to kind of out the back to.
Yeah, but boy, it
Great.
is. Boy, that's something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway.
So we're probably like
Maybe we
into.
should finish.
Yeah, we should wrap this up. So I looked at the last page of your notes and saw some wonderful quotes, and I feel like you probably mishmash these together in your kind of closing meditation thing that you led us on. Do you even remember? Were you in the moment and just going?
I don't remember now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I probably used this part, which is from
Someone good?
Raleigh.
Okay.
Reverend Raleigh out of Central Coast Center for Spiritual Living.
Okay. Do you want to read it?
Sure.
Okay.
I am as eternal and vast as the space that spans beyond the myriad universes. In each and every person I meet and greet my secret and unseen self, which is the self within all selves.
I remember sitting, I can see myself in that room on the other side of this wall here in meditation and feeling it really resonate. Seeing in every person I meet, seeing and greeting my secret and unseen self, the self within all selves. I was just like picturing myself going to the supermarket and looking at the cashier or, kind of going about my day and remembering that, which I really liked. And then under it, you have a Joseph Campbell quote. I'm going to read that one.
Good.
What we have to recognize is that these celestial bodies represented to the ancients two different modes of eternal life. One engaged in the field of time, like throwing off death as the moon to its shadow to be born again. The other disengaged and eternal. And then it goes into the dating of Easter, according to both lunar and solar calendars, suggests that life, like the light that is reborn in the moon and eternal in the sun, finally is one. That's a meaty one. That's from Joseph Campbell, Thou Art That. Joseph Campbell, who continues to publish books long after his death, because people have gone through his many lectures and compiled them into categories.
Yeah, well, the great ones, same thing happens with Holmes, right? So many of the books that we have from Holmes are taken from his lectures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Alan Watts, I think it's his son, is repackaging some of his stuff.
Okay.
So why not?
Why not?
Kids got to make a living.
We're repackaging a Sunday talk right now, so.
So send in your $1 donation now.
All right. Well, that is our first try at this. I'm sure we'll get it down and have it all succinct and something by next time. But
well, and you're really good at this.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So are you.
It was a lot of fun.
All right. So bye. See you next time.
Peace, love, dove.
Okay. do we just stop recording now, or what do we do? Yes, stop recording. Okay, here goes. Bye.